So how dangerous are American schools? School shootings often dominate news coverage and policy debates, and America is said to have school shootings on a scale far beyond every country on earth. The elephant in the room is this: are schools actually dangerous, or does it just feel that way? I'm Ken LaCourte, and this wasn't an easy one to answer fairly, because everyone involved, from the media to politicians to activists, they all seem to have their own theories, solutions, and even statistics. So what do the actual statistics actually say about kids being harmed in school? I'll start by looking at the fear and how that fear affects schools. Then I'll look at the media machine and how it treats school shootings, the difficulty of researching this with so many people playing number games, the raw numbers themselves, and finally, the odds that this could happen to a child or a school. According to Pew Research, 1/3 of American parents say they're very or extremely worried about a shooting at their child's school. Another 37% say they're somewhat worried. That's more than mild anxiety. It's a top-level concern. And it's not just paranoia pulled from nowhere. People watch kids murdered in Sandy Hook. They watched police stand around outside in Texas while children bled. Those moments stay with kids, parents, and teachers, especially when you leave your child at school most of the day. And it's reshaped everything from school policies to buildings to defense products. Nearly every public school in America, like 95% of them, now run active shooter or lockdown drills. We've turned hide in the corner and stay quiet into a routine part of childhood. Now, maybe that's helpful, or maybe not. Some psychologists say those drills themselves have harmful effects on kids' mental health. Schools spend over $3 billion a year on security, metal detectors, surveillance cameras, panic buttons, and software that scans social media for threats. There's a whole market built around that fear. I mean, just bulletproof backpacks are a $70 million a year business. Classroom door barricades, reinforced whiteboards that double as shields, tactical training for teachers. But are those fears justified or hyped up by activists and the news media? I mean, you just don't get perspective from the media machine. And it's not just about school shootings, of course. I mean, any news that's especially dramatic. Take an airplane crash, for instance. It dominates the news for days. Interviews with survivors, investigations, animated graphics. Meanwhile, about 40,000 Americans die in car accidents every year, and that barely makes a news blip outside of local coverage. And that's how the media works. Rare tragedies get outsized attention. But we can't just blame the media. We're the audience that are clicking on those and tuning in, and especially when those stories are dramatic and emotional, and the ratings don't lie. School shootings are much the same. They account for a tiny fraction of child deaths, but when one happens, it becomes a national spectacle. A local shooting outside a convenience store, maybe 30 seconds of airtime. But the moment it happens at a school, that's what they call great TV. Students running, parents crying, anchors speculating about motives, and panels arguing over policy before the bodies are even counted. And school shootings are steeped in politics, with liberal and conservative media and people treating them differently. CNN talks gun control, Fox talks mental health. The result? A public perception that can be very different from the numbers themselves. But even the numbers themselves are hard to figure out. As I dug into the statistics, I realized how super hard it would be to find an objective reality here, because everyone's playing number games. The biggest problem? The data is so often driven by politics. Everyone has an agenda, and they all count things differently. Here's an easy example. It's a true statement to say over twice as many kids die from drowning in swimming pools than by accidental firearm discharges, even though that there are 40 times more guns than pools in America. It's also completely true to say 5 times as many kids are killed with guns than by drowning, because the second statement isn't just about accidents. It includes murders and suicides as well. That's a simple one, but the numbers around school shootings they're just more complicated. And the news and activist organizations, they create a lot of their own statistics because they want more than the government provides. Here are a few examples of the twists that they throw in that make it difficult to research. One of the most widely cited organizations is Everytown for Gun Safety. It's largely funded by Michael Bloomberg. They publish a database tracking gunfire on school grounds. And it can be useful, but their definition is so broad that if someone fires a gun at a school at any hour, it counts. If a bullet lands on school property at New Year's Eve at midnight, they count it. It doesn't matter if school's in session, if kids were there, or if it had anything to do with students at all. Or take the Washington Post. Now, they publish some good data on school shootings, but they have similar issues. Let's say, for instance, that a kid accidentally shoots himself in the foot in a school bathroom. According to the Post, if there were 1,500 kids at school that day, now 1,500 more kids have experienced school violence. The federal government doesn't really help make things clearer either. The National Center for Education Statistics, NCES, it's the main agency that reports on school statistics. But it not only uses the same bullet anywhere criteria, but it also counts brandishing a gun to be a school shooting. So literally, in a fight, if a kid shows another kid a gun, that's a school shooting. These are major players, and they make it tricky to find out basic facts. Gun control activists want the highest possible count to justify more laws. Gun rights groups, they want to isolate the rarest, most extreme cases to minimize the threat. And as usual, the truth is somewhere in between. But it makes conversations difficult to have because you can easily draw radically different conclusions. One person can say, school shootings are exploding across America. And another says, well, your kid has virtually no chance of getting shot at school, and each can point to a chart to back it up. So it's hard to find the full truth by just Googling school shooting statistics. And even if you're trying to be as honest as possible, how should you really best define a school shooting? A gang shooting at school? Well, what if it happened on the weekend? A drive-by shooting outside the school gym at night? How about an on-campus domestic incident between two teachers? As I looked at the raw numbers, the stats that to me gave the best overview were school shootings, school homicides on campus, and incidents what the FBI calls active shooters. Now, let me give you both the definitions of that and then the data. So the best school shooting data I found came from Education Week. They track shootings where someone, a student or a staff member, is injured or killed by gunfire during school hours or at a school event. That means everything from a hallway fight that ends with a shooting to a mass attack. It excludes non-injuries or something like a gang shooting on school grounds at midnight. Here are their numbers from 2018 until now. Now, the trends on these, they can be a little confusing because the numbers jump around a bit. But these years, they've averaged out to 32 incidents per year. After we first get the raw numbers, we'll then look at them in perspective to populations. The next number is student homicides. I used the federal NCES numbers, and as I mentioned, their school shooting numbers were just too loosely defined, but they were the only agency that compiled the number of students actually murdered on campus in a year. Most were with guns, but not all. From the year 2000 to 2021, the average number of student homicides per year in K-12 schools was about 19, again, by all causes. And then, finally, I went to look at the FBI's active shooter criteria. It's what many people visualize when they hear about a school shooting. They're the incidents that make the national news. Now, the FBI defines an active shooter as someone actively trying to kill people in a populated area, where a shooter is targeting multiple victims. So that excludes a targeted personal shooting that often involves one victim. That data gives us a narrower picture. It's not all the homicides on schools, but it does give us an idea of what the schools are working so hard to prevent. So from 2000 to 2022, they recorded an average of 2.3 active shooter events per year. These attacks average about 6 student deaths and 8 injuries annually. So while school shootings can refer to dozens of smaller incidents each year, the person coming in and trying to kill kids, those events are relatively rare. Of course, these numbers exist in a much bigger context because it's a big country. The United States has around 123,000 K-12 schools, and they serve roughly 55 million school-aged kids. Okay, so now let me take a moment to compare these numbers to other countries. Because when an American debates anyone from another country online, they at some point are likely to hear, yeah, America, whatever, but how are all those school shootings doing? And at first glance, they're right. And then when you dig into the numbers, they're still right. I mean, this does seem to be a uniquely American problem. When you look at countries who actually track these numbers, and not everyone does, and for what it's worth, a lot of countries just make up statistics. What's actually easier to see is the big dramatic events and try to keep them in perspective. I mean, China, for instance, they had a big jump in student deaths in 2024 with 64 kids killed. Or you can see terrorist attacks at schools in Russia or Pakistan or African countries. They kill hundreds. And of course, thousands of kids die in warfare in a lot of countries going on throughout the world. But still, no one else comes close to the United States when it comes to the routine killing of kids on campuses. So yes, the United States has more school shootings than anywhere else. But let's take a look at how common they are on a per school or a per student basis. because then what you'll discover is that when it comes to deadly violence, the safest place a child can be, by far, is at school. Okay, so what are the odds that your school or your kid might be affected by all of this? Let's come back to our major numbers. All of those numbers are averages per year, as I described earlier, with a small little bit of rounding. The total number of yearly school shootings is 32. Of these, 2.3 are considered active shooting incidents. Those take place out of a pool of 123,000 schools. So the likelihood of a school being involved in any single shooting is 1 in 3,800. And the chances of them seeing an active shooter, that's 1 in 53,000. Total student homicides at school, 19. In a country with about 55 million students, the odds for an individual kid being killed are 1 in 2.2 million. For active shooter deaths, those 6 per year equate to 1 in 9.2 million. 8 injuries equates to 1 in 6 million. Now, I'm never going to say that 19 yearly school homicides are acceptable. I mean, clearly the only acceptable answer is 0. But as a reference point, the National Weather Service says the chances of you being struck by lightning on a given year are 1 in 1.2 million. So now let's put the death numbers in head-to-head comparison of how kids die in America. The stats are a tad off because these estimates count for kids up to age 17, while the school numbers, they always include up to 18-year-olds. So converted into yearly deaths per 100,000 kids, the total number who die each year is just under 26. Accidents, 14.2. Drug overdoses, 5.2. Suicides, 3.9. Homicides outside of school, 2.6. Cancer, 2.4. Drowning, 0.6. Homicide in school, 0.03. Active shooter in school, 0.01. I mean, so those last numbers aren't typos. However you look at it, the safest place for your child is in school. Nothing else comes close. The fear, the school drills, the fortresses, the America's crazy narrative, and the money spent are all for those bottom numbers. Now, look, I know exactly what it's like to have police come to my house and tell me that someone I love has been murdered. But it's important to have perspective on how to protect ourselves, our children, and our society. So the fear is real, and the deaths are real, but the odds of being shot at school are astronomically low. Are we spending too much time and attention trying to fix this rare problem? Or is it maybe the right amount? I mean, after all, $3 billion divided by 123,000 schools, I mean, that's only $24,000 per school. It's a complicated world, isn't it? And I hope I gave you some food for thought, because I often find that the deeper I look into these issues, they don't always appear the same as when I first read them in the news. I also saw that with Louis C.K. as well. In 2017, his career was ripped apart by Me Too allegations, but most people don't have any real idea what he did. And a closer look at that case tells you more than about one comedian, but how our society applied justice. Was the fallout proportionate to his behavior, or was he a victim of changing standards and a media looking for scalps? Hey, thanks for watching. Until next time.